Welcome to our Think Big series brought to you by PSG. My name is Adrian Pask and I'm the Chief Investment Officer at PSG Wealth. Before we go into the speakers for the webinar today, maybe just a brief introduction to PSG for those not familiar with our firm. We've been in operation since 1998. We're a leading independent financial services group. We've got an extensive footprint throughout South Africa and Namibia. And we pride ourselves on our bigger picture approach. So you would have seen some of our marketing efforts speaking to that effect as well, being bigger picture thinkers. And this really to try and indicate that we perform holistic financial planning in our business. We've got services from asset management to wealth management to short-term insurance, and we integrate those different services to provide holistic financial planning. The other key mention is that we inherently think long-term as well. So that speaks of our approach as bigger picture thinkers. We're an advice-led business backed by some of the best independent financial planners in the country. And these are the guys that are responsible for bringing the services together to meet client objectives. In terms of this Think Big series, it's really a collection of dialogues with high-value speakers hosted by an award-winning financial journalist, Bruce Whitfield. And each topic is designed to address a human truth in terms of things that's causing South Africans anxiety and uncertainty during this period. And the series is really aimed at empowering our audiences with some thought in terms of how they can formulate their own opinions and manage expectations regarding various aspects as it involves our daily lives at the moment. So in today's webinar, Bruce Whitfield is conducting an interview with Nick Mallett. As you know, Nick is one of the most iconic South African personalities in sport, let alone rugby. He's an Oxford graduate, a coach and a rugby player. In terms of his track record, he's inspired South Africa to a record equaling run in terms of 17 consecutive wins. In 1998, the Boks made a remarkable recovery from a Lions series defeat the preceding year to win the championship, the Tri-Nations, the following year, 1998. And during his 4 years in Italy, Nick masterminded Italy's first win over the Pumas and then later against France. So lastly, from my side, the series is free and shareable and open to anyone interested. So please feel free to pass this on, whether you're a PSG client or not. And in the social media campaign, hashtag is hashtag Think Big PSG. In terms of Bruce, he obviously needs very little introduction. Suffice to say that he's an award-winning journalist and media personality that has built up a very strong profile in South Africa. And once again, we're pleased to have him on board to help us facilitate the interview with Nick today. Over to you, Bruce. Thank you.
Nick Mallett is a former Springbok rugby player, former coach of the Springboks. He coached the Italian rugby union side as well. Today, better known as a commentator on all things rugby, but he's certainly a man who's got rugby in his veins. Nick Mallett, before we get on to the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today, I'm curious as to who your favorite rugby player of all time is.
Wow, that really is a tough question, and I've been sitting here trying to work it out. I think it would probably be Dan Carter from New Zealand at number 10. I don't think I've ever seen a more complete player than him. He was able to defend very well. He was a beautiful drop goal kicker. He kicked well for poles. He scored tries. He created opportunities for other people, and his decision making was absolutely outstanding. So I thought that when he was in his pomp, and I think that was probably against the British Lions, I'd never seen a player to touch him. So, but a guy like Fourie du Preez would come very close, our South African scrum half. I know that the All Blacks rated him as the best scrum half they'd ever seen. So, pretty close between those two.
And who's the W.G. Grace of rugby? I mean, W.G. Grace is seen as this great grandfather of cricket. Who's the guy in global rugby?
Well, in South Africa, probably Donnie Craven. You'd have to go back. He was played in about 4 different positions for South Africa, and obviously coached the Stellenbosch and the Springboks, and was our president of the rugby union. So he would be he would probably be the South African one. In world terms, I would say, at his time, there was Albert Farras from France, who was also had a period of 30 years, but not as well known as Donnie Craven. So if you're looking about a player administrator, it'd be Donnie Craven. As a rugby player, in New Zealand, would probably say Colin Meads, their lock forward. We look at Frick Dupree as someone who could probably compete against him. But that's the wonderful thing. There's never a right answer for these things. It's just personal preference.
So, Nick, what is it about rugby that gets you going? I mean, you've played rugby all of your life. You're involved in the administration of rugby. You now are the face of rugby, not only in South Africa, but around the world as well. I mean, what is it about this game that lights your chest?
Well, I think for all boys, a physical contest, whenever you see little children born. When my daughter was born, she was picking up flowers and playing in the garden, looking at birds and butterflies. And the first time my son could walk, he picked a stick up and started cutting the flowers down. So there's generally, there's an enthusiasm getting involved in conflict. It's a sport that, first of all, I love team sports. I think it's absolutely fantastic playing and working with other people. I respond better to trying to do my best with other people than just doing my best by myself. So that was very attractive. It requires courage and huge courage, in fact, and a lot of, bravery in going into situations where in normal circumstances you would never consider doing so. I mean, Schalk Burger Jr., for example, some of the times when he would clean players out or steal ball, it was just breathtaking how little fear he had for this, what could happen to him. But I think above all, it's a team aspect, the fact that you can have a good game and lose and you feel really down from the team's perspective. And if you can contribute a little bit and the team wins, there's a fantastic South African word, "heers," which describes it best. I absolutely love it. People say that there was a statement that said that rugby formed character. And I believe it's different. I think rugby reveals character. I can watch a little under 10 game on the side of a prep school, and within 15 minutes, I'll be able to pick up, the little courageous tackler, the classy little fly half, the big front row forward who plods from set piece to set piece. I mean, it's just wonderful. So there's so much about it. And funny enough, it's a very cerebral game as well. It's a game that can be played in so many different ways. That perhaps isn't as acknowledged by most people. South Africa in the World Cup were a classic example of a team deciding to play with a certain structure that was very different from Australia, England, and New Zealand, and it was very successful. So as a coach, it presents you with wonderful opportunities. The team that you get is never the same. So like bridge, you never get the same hand in bridge. When you're coaching, you never get the same players, and it's a question of how you maximize their strengths and try and protect them from any deficiencies you've got. It's just a wonderful, wonderful game.
You need to diffuse the cerebral question, because by then equating bridge with rugby, now there's no argument at all. When it comes to rugby and the power that it's got as a unifier, I mean, we go back to 1995 and that incredible World Cup in South Africa and the role that rugby has played in South Africa, very divisive before 1995, yes. Then an incredible healer after 1995 and masterfully used by Nelson Mandela as a tool for cohesion in a country. It's been remarkable that way too.
It really has. It really has, Bruce. The 95 was extraordinary in the generosity of spirit that our president, Madiba, showed in that it was against the majority feeling in the ANC and amongst the black population. They'd always supported opposition teams against South Africa. And here, a couple of years after democratic elections, he was asking them to put on Springbok jerseys and wear caps and support us in the World Cup. And he came under a tremendous amount of criticism. But I thought he showed unbelievable diplomacy there. He understood the value that game had. Sadly, at that time, for the white population, probably only, and a large percentage of the brown population, the coloured population in Cape Town also played rugby, but in the Eastern Cape, it was only the small enclave of black rugby. So it was mainly supported by whites and mainly by white Afrikaners. And I think that his sensitivity to the fact that it was very important to them, the Springbok, and the fact that they felt this was an opportunity that we could compete on the world stage, to take away that, he thought would have created a lot of unhappiness and perhaps even, caused more Chris Hani type of situations, which were absolutely tragic. So he showed unbelievable diplomacy and political skills. And then I think Edward Griffiths played a huge part as CEO at the time. One team, one country, getting Mandela to speak to the team, and Nelson, and obviously Francois Pienaar's relationship with President Mandela was a very close one. So even though we only had Chester Williams on the wing and the team wasn't transformed, we had the whole of South Africa, or the majority of South Africa, supporting that team, and it was a wonderful occasion. The big difference between that and 1919 was we had a transformed team, and we had the 100%, I think, support from the black population for our Siya Kolisi-led side in 2019. And that, to me, was even more powerful than 1995. 95 was symbolic, but I think it was put into practice in 2019 through, again, fantastic relationships between Rassie Erasmus, Siya Kolisi, Rassie Erasmus, and Saru's sensitivity to allowing the coach a free hand, providing he understood the importance of transformation.
And what you're saying now is so critical, because we leapfrog to 2019 and this extraordinary team that turns up in Japan. Did you really believe at the start of the contest that they were going to make it not only to the final, but actually bring the World Cup home for a third time? And a third time in a relatively short period of time, since 1995, since inclusion. I mean, not many people would have given them a fighting chance of bringing that cup home.
Well, no, that's correct. I actually predicted I got the semi-finals right, in the sense that we would play against Wales. I thought Wales would make the semi-final. I thought England and New Zealand and South Africa would be in the semi-final. I didn't realize that England would beat New Zealand. I thought it would be a New Zealand-South African final, and I did think we'd get to the final. And then, it can be anyone's game. And New Zealand, I thought, the way we played during that World Cup and the performance we put up in the final, the dominant pack of forwards, our incredible physicality on defense. I very much doubt whether New Zealand would have beaten us on that day, particularly given the poor selections that Hansen made going into the semi-final, leaving a tight head prop, his best tight head prop out. He didn't have a big ball-carrying flank. He played his best fly-half at fullback. A number of things that actually I thought weakened the All Black effort. So I still believe. I didn't believe before the World Cup we could do it, but at the World Cup, and I was there from before the quarterfinal, there was a growing momentum in that team and a self-belief that was palpable. You could see it and sense it, and it was an incredibly happy team. And happy teams often become successful ones.
I mean, so much of what you say goes to dealing with life. I mean, your earlier point about rugby being a cerebral game, and not only on the field is it a cerebral game, but it's a deeply strategic effort. And it's a strategic effort way beyond the players, the players, into the administrators, into the politics of the administrators. And you cannot have fully functional teams performing well on the field, just as you can't have fully functioning teams in an office environment at work when the boardroom's in chaos, for example. I mean, the parallels are actually quite extraordinary.
Exactly, and that is why I prefaced this whole thing by saying it was wonderful to see Saru show the sensitivity to allow Rassie, providing he understood the importance of transformation. All these things are key. So you can never get success without trust. There has to be trust between the players and their captain, between the captain and the coach, and between the coach and the administrators. And in 2019, under Rassie Erasmus, there was trust right through that line. So it started out with Yuri Roux, obviously, and Mark Alexander. Mark Alexander, as president, has been outstanding, I think, and very sensitive in the fact that he understands that administrators must administer the business side of rugby. And Yuri Roux is a lawyer. He, I think, is an accountant, and both of them, you understand that that's their strength. Too many administrators think they should be coaches and selectors instead of running the business of business of rugby better. And I think by appointing Rassie Erasmus, they knew they backed the right horse, absolutely. And he is a meticulous planner. He knew right from the start that he wanted who he wanted as captain. And I had a meal with him just before after he had taken the job, actually. And he was asking what he thought his big issues would be, and I said right at the outset, you have to understand transformation is not negotiable. If you transform and lose, it's acceptable, but if you win and don't transform, it's unacceptable. So transform and win is absolutely the best of the best. And I said it's possible because we are now seeing really outstanding black players come through who actually enhance the Springbok team and make it a much more powerful team. So he understood that. He understood he needed to get his selections right, his captain right, and Saru just asked him with the government, because what Rassie was good about, he left Saru to negotiate with the Minister of Sport. And so there was trust between Saru, the Minister of Sport, and between Minister of Sport and our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who came over and watched the final and was tremendously supportive of the Springbok side. And so in every aspect, from the president to the Minister of Sport, to Saru, to the coach, to the captain, to every player, including the guys who weren't even on the bench, they were supporting that side. And that's the trust you have to get in business. You've got to have trust between every level of business in order for that business to work properly. Because if there's a breakdown of trust, then you get the corridor talking, then you get fingers pointing, then you get it's your fault and not my fault, you didn't tell me to do that, and or excuses and all the things that you don't want in terms of any team sport or any working group. You want people to accept responsibility and take responsibility and pass on credit and admit when they've made a mistake. It's just about honesty and trust.
And then, of course, on the day, the weather matters. The dinner before the night before matters. I mean, the Kiwis used that as an excuse in 1995.
Yes.
And of course, the referee matters. And I, until speaking to you fairly recently, didn't understand the importance. It's a bit like American jury selection, going out to choose who the referee is going to be in a game, and the critical importance of it. I recently chatted to Jonathan Kaplan, who was very clear about his career and how successful he'd been, but the mistakes he'd made, and the people who hate his guts, and the people who think he's great. And it's the great impossible job of all time, is to become a referee in a Rugby World Cup final, and that was quite a fractious decision, wasn't it?
Well, they're trying to make it a team sport, but it is very much an individual sport. You're out there and you are judged on your decisions, and ruthlessly so, by television, which is now gives you slow motion feedback, so the people in their couches can see the mistakes you make. So it really is it's a very, very difficult job. But I think World Rugby have improved the fact that they do work as a team. The two assistant referees no longer touch judges. The assistant referees are there to help in the decision making. You've got a TMO who can look at foul play and build up to a try, whether there were errors or knock on or forward passes within 2 phases of build up to a try. So the referee is supported. What actually happened in this World Cup was interesting because, first of all, the selection, you selected the best 12 in the world, and that is subjective anyway. It's whether the Northern Hemisphere prefer a certain style of refereeing as opposed to the Southern Hemisphere, particularly New Zealand, who want to see an open flowing game. They don't want to see a game that concentrates on mauls and scrums and the breakdown. And because of the weather in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of referees are very good at that part of the game and not quite as good at a free-flowing game. So that is always a big debate, who goes. And there were 7 Northern Hemisphere referees and 5 from the Southern Hemisphere. which probably was one too many from the Northern Hemisphere, in my opinion, but it goes to a vote. And the referees, apart from the first weekend where there were a couple of mistakes, and unfortunately, Jerome Garces was involved with the Springboks against the All Blacks in the opening game. And in that game, the way he wanted to referee was the way that New Zealand wanted to play the game. So he wanted the ball in and out of scrums. He wanted the ball in and out of lineouts. He wanted there to be quick ball at rucks. He didn't want to contest a set-piece contest. And the Springboks wanted a set-piece contest. So they were dominating the scrums, and he would allow the All Blacks to collapse the scrums and play the ball when it's illegal to collapse the scrum under pressure. He allowed them to clean out coming in from the side. He allowed off-the-ball incidents in this game. Now Rassie Erasmus sent a clip to World Rugby Referees Manager, which, as every coach does after every game, asking why certain decisions were made. And there were 20-odd decisions that he questioned in this game, which are a lot. And in the game, he requested why Jerome and from World Rugby, why he took these decisions. Now, it was Jerome Garces was one of our top referees. He was in the top 3 or 4 referees. And so he was a widely respected referee. And it was worrying to see a referee have an influence on the game by refereeing in a way that it wasn't contrary to the laws of the game, but he ignored certain things that one team wanted to have, get an advantage out of, which was the scrums and mauls, especially driving mauls. So by the time it got to quarterfinals, he was one of the 4. And we were refereed by Barnes, who was an outstanding referee, and we had the game against Japan, which went fine. I still thought Dallander scored a try just before halftime, which Barnes afterwards said, yes, perhaps he made a mistake, that he wasn't crawling and he wasn't held. And then we got the semi-final, and Barnes, it was England against New Zealand. Barnes couldn't referee that. And then we thought Barnes would do the final, which would have been New Zealand against South Africa. So South Africa, Wales, we weren't allowed, we couldn't have a Wales referee, a South African referee, because the Wales referee was in the mix as well. And so we got Garces. And it was interesting. The team was very nervous to see whether he was going to referee the same way. But having had a look at his clips, having re-looked at the way he refereed that game, having refereed very well after that in other games, and I think he had one very good quarterfinal where he refereed very well. He went into the Wales game that was a close game, and he allowed South Africa to dominate in the areas that they wanted to, and to give them credit for it. So we dominated the scrum, he gave us credit. We dominated with the driving maul, he gave us credit. Now, when you take that away from a team which is playing the laws playing the game according to the laws, it has a huge effect on the results. So we managed to win that game, and then through injury and through selection, because it was then England against South Africa, so we couldn't have Barnes and we couldn't have Jaco Paper, and so it was again Garces, and I think the way in which Siya Kolisi had handled the semi-final, the way in which the team had controlled the set pieces. By the time we came in against England, who were favourites, he was going to referee what he saw. He knew what South Africa were trying to do. He knew what England were trying to do, because they'd been very good in certain areas against New Zealand. And he was going to allow both teams to dominate those areas of the game if they could. But because South Africa dominated the set piece and dominated the breakdown and certainly dominated the physicality on defence, England never could get their running game going. So he gave us the 6 scrum penalties, he gave us more penalties, and we were able to control the pace of the game, which suited us. And it was a fantastic final, which is why when a referee does his job correctly, giving credit to both styles of play, you can't, just because you prefer running rugby, ignore the fact that the laws state that you can't collapse a retreating scrum. A loose head can't go in. He can't put his hand on the ground to stabilize himself. In a maul, you can't take out the support jumpers. There are all sorts of laws that you can ignore in favor of a running game, but that's not fair on the team that is wanting to apply pressure through those areas.
Is all of this scientific approach to a game adding to the game, or ultimately detracting from the game of rugby as it might have been envisaged on the fields of rugby 150 years ago?
I think the game at World Cup 2019 was a fantastic game. The rugby played all out. England's game against New Zealand was sensational. I thought there was far too much kicking in the Wales against South Africa game, and we should introduce laws that negate this box kick, which is a nothing play. It's just to make sure that you don't make a mistake in your own half. You don't want to kick it out to give them a line out. You're wanting a chance to win the ball back, but it's not a great chance. So, I mean, there are laws you can just manipulate a bit to stop kicking like that. But the final was a great game of rugby between two contrasting styles of play. We saw Japan play the most brilliant rugby against Scotland and against Ireland. We saw some minnows. We saw, I think it was Uruguay beat Fiji. So there were some fantastic performances at that World Cup. What's important is you want ball in play. You want at least 35 to 40 minutes of ball in play. So there's action, lots of action. And I think you want a nice balance between set piece and penalties. So fewer than 20 penalties, around about 10 scrums, between 20 and 30 lineouts, and then you've got a good game of rugby. Now, New Zealand have tried to tinker with the laws by making it faster, and all they've done is increase the penalty level in the first weekend that they played. So we saw in this new series that they're playing at the moment in New Zealand, I think there were 66 penalties in 2 games. So you're looking at an average of 33 penalties a game, and that is just stop, start, and it's not enjoyable to watch. So you have to get a balance. You've got to get a balance between continuity and set piece and your kicking game and ball in play. And I think we weren't miles away for the World Cup. I think perhaps the kicking was a bit overdone by teams, but it's World Cup, and so it's a team. You just don't want to make a mistake. So sides become a little bit more conservative. But there were some cracking games between South Africa and New Zealand in the Rugby Championship leading up to the World Cup. So I don't think the game was when I was playing the game, to put it in perspective, in 1982 to 1985, Western Province won the Currie Cup, I think 5 consecutive or 6 consecutive times. And we thought we were brilliant, but the ball was in play for about 17 minutes, 18 minutes. I mean, it was half the ball in play time that you get now. So that's twice as much entertainment that the viewer and the spectator is getting, and I think that's good for the game.
And ultimately, that's all that matters, really. I mean, it's all great to have wonderful practitioners of the game, to have the best referees, and to have the best rules and the best laws. If nobody wants to watch the engagement, well, you might as well stop.
Well, Bruce, there is no single professional sport that doesn't have spectators and sponsors. If you don't have spectators, you're not going to get a sponsor to want to sponsor an event. And if you don't have television viewers, you're not going to get advertisers around the event. So the most important thing of any sport is to be entertaining. We have to we're in the entertainment game sport. And if tennis or golf or American football is more entertaining, or soccer more entertaining than rugby has to look at its game to ensure that we remain the sport of choice to our core viewers, and hopefully attract more younger viewers, more female viewers, and make it a game which people want to watch. So it is very worrying when you see competitions where the game doesn't matter, and occasionally in Super Rugby we've seen matches which are nothing matches. The teams can't qualify. They're down in the bottom half of the draw. There are less than 5,000 people watching the game. It's a very sad affair. But live sport with the results mattering, every result must matter, and 2 different sets of supporters going mad, supporting their teams, putting on their jerseys, their different colors, and then television that captures all this so beautifully. It just is a fantastic spectacle. It's just I cannot tell you how wonderful that World Cup final was. I mean, I'm sitting here and just reliving it in my head. It was 60,000 people around that stadium, and absolutely glued to that game, and everyone just exhilarating in those last 12 minutes when we scored 2 tries.
Now, this is the longest I've had a conversation with anybody in the last 3 months without mentioning COVID-19. I mean, it's unprecedented. Unprecedented. There we are. I've used the word. But But the game is dead this year. I mean, it's re-emerging in parts of the world where it's safe to do so. It's a contact sport. It's a highly physical sport. What is the impact, do you think, long-term impact on the game of rugby?
Well, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And I think a lot of people have been talking about the opportunity this gives to World Rugby to try and align seasons, to try and get seasons, to not have an 11-month season where players have to play overseas in the Northern Hemisphere when they should be resting and recuperating. Probably a 9-month season, 9 to 10-month season is optimal. And we need to try and get the Northern Hemisphere to start playing rugby through the summer months, because it's not that hot there. So they could have evening games, afternoon games, but it means changing television schedules and it is an incredibly complex thing. I mean, they understand the Six Nations has that slot, and it's a perfect slot because it's a cold time of year. There's no cricket, no tennis, no important golf. There's a bit of soccer, but it really does. It's part of the whole national psyche. The Six Nations, a trip to Italy, a trip to France, a couple of home games. It's just wonderful. So to get them to move it is going to be very difficult. But there's an opportunity there, because I don't think it's fair on rugby players to have to go from tough competition to tough competition to tough competition and never get a break, never get a breather. If you play over 30 games, 35 games a season, you're almost guaranteed to get an injury. And we need to look after the players and look after their medical health as well. So that's the opportunity. Unfortunately, it is the most, apart from wrestling, I presume, it's the sport that has the most contact of any, I can imagine, the team sport. So rugby will probably be the last to be allowed to play. And when you see New Zealand are only playing because they eradicated it for 2 weeks, and now they've got a couple more cases, but they virtually sorted it out. We have rising cases at the time that we're getting out of lockdown. So the cases will continue to rise. They won't drop because they dropped when we were in hard lockdown. So when rugby is wanting to come back, the cases are increasing, the number of COVID cases. So if one person in a group of 40 players or staff member gets it, such is the practice schedules and the way in which teams travel in bus together or playing together, in a change room together, halftime together, in a huddle saying, well done, we just scored a try. They're going to have to go 2 weeks on isolation. And I mean, that's going to ruin any competition. How can you have two of your teams pulling out of the competition because one or two of their players have got? So it is very complicated. Perhaps this year we might have to put a cross through it. Maybe we'll get a Currie Cup from September onwards. Maybe they're hoping to try and get an international season in, maybe end October, November, to try and get a team over here or a few teams over here and us over there, just to get some money into the coffers. But otherwise, from a medical and health point of view, South Africa's in the worst position because, as I said, cases rising and we're coming out of lockdown.
So how does this play out then for rugby in South Africa, which was in such a happy place after the World Cup in Japan? Everybody was feeling good about each other, really cohesive, really good progress being made in a politically and socially critical sport. Do we run the risk of this unraveling?
Well, I think first of all, we've got to look at our structures here. Have we got the right structures in terms of our professional setup? We've got 2 teams playing over in Europe, and 2 teams playing over there. We've got 4 teams playing in Super Rugby. So teams playing down south, 2 teams playing up north. Perhaps we need to take a look at the number of professional rugby players we can afford in this country, and relook at the different franchises. And I think it's an opportunity in South Africa to if you play a professional sport, you should be happy to go wherever you get bought. That happens in America in professional sport. So if a guy's an SA Schools player and he plays fly-off and he played for Affies or he played for Grey Bloem, it doesn't mean he's going to carry on playing for Northern Transport, for the Bulls or for the Cheetahs. He could be sent to Port Elizabeth because the franchise in Port Elizabeth needs a fly-off and they need to strengthen their team. So what I think would be best, and the professional way in which it should be run, I think, is to divide up South Africa differently into a Gauteng, which is, you amalgamate the Lions and the Bulls. You have the Western Cape. I understand that's very, very complex, but you'd be able to play at the FNB Stadium. I mean, what you've got to do is you've got to spread the talent around 4 franchises, one which I believe has to include the Eastern Cape, because the Eastern Cape is the heartbeat of black rugby. And so therefore, Mapimpi came out of there, Am came out of there, Koboko comes out of there. There are numerous rugby players from the Eastern Cape who've left the Eastern Cape. Siya Kolisi comes from there, who go to other unions and make their names. Whereas if you had a professional franchise that functioned with a very good coach and a decent stipend, a decent amount of money so that they could keep their players, then you would regenerate rugby in that area, which is a traditional rugby area for black players. I think it's a no-brainer. I think you have to do it. South Africa has to have a side. You can't have Cape Town and Durban and nothing in between. I don't believe it. I think you need something in the Eastern Cape. And I think Gauteng, I understand it's a very strong. They can easily handle 2 professional teams. But it's a small area, 50 kilometers apart. Surely you can come to some arrangement whereby you have one franchise up there, take half the players from the Bulls and half the players from and spread them out so that the Eastern Cape has a powerful side. And then those 4 teams, we must decide whether we're going to go north and play in the north and try and win competitions in Europe, or else we're going to stick in the Southern Hemisphere with our time different issues that we have with our flights and the complications of having to spend 2 or 3 weeks away from home every time you play on a away trip. So I think that's the big decision we got to make. Reduce the number of professional players, make those professional players better, pay them what they deserve so that they don't go overseas, and then also we need to make sure that we're in the competition that suits South Africa. And my feeling is it probably suits us to go north.
And also, should we be looking outside of South Africa for investment in South African rugby? Is it even feasible?
Well, you see, you've all got to go around. South Africa is a special situation because of our political background. We need to have transformed teams. And so, which means, and we've proven that transformed teams can be successful with the right coach and the right culture. So if you do get foreign investment coming in, it has to be a hands-off foreign investment. They can't come and say, you have to play that player, you have to play this player, otherwise I'm not putting my money in there. That's what people must understand. Often people who own teams in Europe want to have a say in the selection of the side. Now, it is their money, but it's not their area of expertise. A guy might have made his money in electricity pylons, and now he wants to pick the tight head prop over the weekend. That's not his area of expertise. So you leave it up to people like Rassie Erasmus, who does the job really well. Give him a 2-year or 4-year contract, and then either say thanks very much, we're going to move on, or renew his contract. But don't interfere. Put money in because you believe you can make money out of the sport, out of television, out of sponsorships, but don't interfere in the selection. Appoint someone who understands that area and have confidence that he will do the job properly.
In an economy that is going to shrink up to 10% this year, what is the outlook then for South African rugby? Because rugby sports events draw big sponsors and all of that sort of stuff is great, but in a desperately constrained economy, in an economy where the games aren't the same, where television rights aren't the same, where if you watch a game and there's no cheering in the crowd and no hurting abuse at the ref, a lot of the fun goes out of it. So how do we manage this financially for the next year, 2, 3?
Again, I'm more on the rugby side than I am on the commercial and administrative side of rugby, but I am involved in television, and I know that rugby is a very, very strong part of our sporting offering in Super Sport. We have tremendous support from the public, and after the World Cup, we were absolutely convinced that we would increase our viewership because of the interest, so much interest generated around that World Cup and feel good that came out of that World Cup. So I don't think that's going to go away in a hurry. I think that that viewers are crying out for live sport. They love their rugby. They absolutely do love it. We want competitions where every match matters, not something where we're playing the Queensland Reds, who couldn't care less whether they're in the top 8 or not. But they want to know that every match means you're going to go up or go down, or you're going to qualify or not. And I also think that that television needs live sport as much as live sport needs television. We viewers will go. I mean, just look at what happened to New Zealand when they opened up. I mean, I've never seen so many people in Auckland. It was a full stadium. There was a full stadium down in Dunedin. I mean, guys were just so happy to be on the side of the field, applauding themselves in their own country for coming through this terrible period, safely. And I can see that happening in South Africa. I can see people saying, I can't wait to see a schoolboy rugby game. I can't wait to go and watch a Grey Bloem against a Grey PE or a Bishop's Rondebosch match. I want to go and see the Stormers play. I want to go and see the Sharks and the Bulls play again. I can't wait for the Springboks to get together. I mean, I feel that. I love rugby, obviously, but I promise you, so do a huge number of people in South Africa. So I'm hoping sponsors will stay. I'm sure television will stay with the sport. We just need a bit of patience and obviously play when it's safe to do so. But we're not going to, in a hurry, forget what 2019 did for our country and also for the sport of rugby, because we were in a difficult place over the previous 10 years. It hasn't been a happy place. And it was a real example to every single sphere of South Africa what people can do when they play for each other and play with each other from all different cultures. Mutual respect, trust, commitment to each other, and a great leader. I mean, fantastic.
And I mean, what do you predict for the next Rugby World Cup? I mean, Sia's young enough. Is Rassie?
Yeah.
He got the gears to keep going. Is Saru's got his back rather than sticking an eye in it, because so often the coaching job ends in tears. Long before it's always the indicator that things aren't happy. We got a good squad that can take us to the next World Cup.
We really have. And I think the fact that we're allowed to pick our overseas players is very important, because we have lost 17 or 18 of those 33 have gone overseas for, obviously, from the rand to the yen or the pound or the euro is far weaker. So it is an opportunity for them. But I still believe that Sia's got another 4 years easily. And importantly, he needs to be protected from playing every single game. He needs, his whole career needs, as New Zealand do to McCaw and Richie McCaw and to Dan Carter in the 2015 World Cup. They gave them 6 months off and no rugby, just to get their bodies right. So I think if you have a centralized system where you have a director of rugby like Rassie, liaising very closely with the 4 Super Rugby franchises and with the Springbok coach, Jacques Nienaber, who's a very close friend of Rassie's, I think we're on a very good path. I know that Rassie and Jacques, and Sia, their words after the World Cup win was, let's not drop off like every South African team has done. After winning a World Cup, we always have a fall off. We go down to 5th or 6th in the world. There's a problem with coaching. There's a problem with government. There's a problem with Saru. And then a new hero comes in, a new captain comes in, and we manage to climb up again. I think what they want to do is try and maintain consistency. And I think we're capable of doing that. We do produce brilliant rugby players, and we're broadening the number of people playing rugby in South Africa. So there's no reason we're not going to get more beasts and more Mapimpis and Lukanya Ams coming through. In fact, we are going to get more of them, because if you look at the junior ranks, we've got some really talented youngsters.
Nick Mallett, thank you very much indeed for sharing your insights into the wonderful, complex and often divisive world of rugby at a time where there just isn't very much rugby going on at all. There's an 8-year-old in my house wondering why the hell he can't go out and play the game. And it's deeply frustrating. So it's felt across many levels of the population. Thank you, Nick Mallett, very much indeed. Adrian, back to you.
Thank you, Bruce and Nick, for your independent and very honest insights today. Nick, you've provided some valuable perspective, having been involved in international rugby in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere for a very long time. So I'm sure our clients have benefited from the insights today. There were some valuable lessons through the interview. I think maybe first of all, winning is not always easy. While each country participating in a rugby match dreams of winning the trophy, becoming the champion is not always that simple. It depends on a lot more than just having the best players in your team. It's player selection and strategy and team dynamics, and then also very importantly, planning and preparation are all key things to ensure a successful outcome in the end. Secondly, something I've picked up is that a successful rugby squad has a team of specialists supporting them. So very important, there are several specialists who each focus on helping the players, whether it's a backline coach or a forwards coach or defensive coach. And then also behind the scenes, physios and even psychologists, as modern sports has become a fine science built around the support of specialists. And then lastly, each game requires a tailored approach. So rugby fundies will tell you that every game requires its own strategy depending on the opposition. And whether it's a strong defensive team that you're facing or a strong offensive team that you're facing, whether conditions are dry or wet, the altitude, which direction the wind is blowing, all those things factor then into a tailored approach that needs to be followed for each game. And I think these lessons actually transpose very nicely into the wealth management environment at the moment, because planning and preparation is really what we assist our clients with. We support them, as I mentioned at the introduction, to see that bigger picture, to recognize the various factors that plays into a successful plan. And being successful requires more than just having a dream or a plan, but requires a plan and a strategy, and then, of course, mindful execution where you leverage off the experience of experts that can support you. So we have a wide variety of skill sets and expertise that can help investors build their wealth and reach their financial goals. And obviously, as an independent advisory business, we enlist the help of some of the strongest asset management businesses, both locally and abroad. And in terms of the conditions, the current environment, as we all know, is quite challenging, and a tailored approach is definitely recommended. We always ensure that we diversify client assets quite extensively. We take that longer-term view, and we encourage investors to be those longer-term thinkers, bigger picture thinkers, and don't let the conditions keep you out of the game. So in conclusion from my side, when you're heading into an important game, you want the experts on your side. If you have already enlisted the help of a PSG advisor, we encourage you to engage with them. If you haven't, you're welcome to touch base with us through our registration platform. And then lastly, a final thanks to Nick and Bruce for the interviews today. I think it was very successful. So thank you very much. We welcome your feedback from the audience. Please communicate with us and look out for the next Think Big series. Thank you.